Are your team members satisfied and engaged? There's a difference, and it matters. In today's competitive world, building a team culture where satisfaction and engagement work hand in hand is the secret to long-term success. At our training session, we'll show you how to create that culture. Inspired by Jason Kay's groundbreaking leadership framework, this one-day training gives you practical tools to increase employee satisfaction and drive deeper engagement. It's time to rethink your team culture and get results. Seats are limited. Register today for Cultivating a Rainforest Team Culture at www.jasonkay.com. That's www.jasonkay.com.
Welcome to Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. This episode is brought to you by Multifamily Media Network, delivering the latest news, ideas, and inspiration across the multifamily sector. Now let's go ahead and jump into the next episode of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. Welcome back to Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. I'm your host, Bill Nye, and we have a really interesting guest for us today. We have Karla Saladino from New York City, and she's the managing partner for Mirador Real Estate in New York City. And so you live in New York, of course, home of the world's greatest sports franchise, my favorite team of all time, the New York Yankees. I bet you didn't know that Mr. Potato Head is actually a New York Yankees fan.
That is exciting. I've actually moved more than one Yankee in my career, so very cool. They've always been my favorite New York team as well.
Well, glad to hear that. So we have something in common, and I could bore our audience all day with stories about the New York Yankees, but that's not why we're here to talk. So I find what you do very interesting, and I can imagine how challenging it is to do what you do in New York City. It's probably very heavily regulated, a lot of rules, do's and don'ts, and that sort of thing. That's just kind of the nature of doing business in New York City. My oldest son, Charles, lived and worked in New York City for 9 years. And so I have, some familiarity with the city for sure. But tell our audience a little bit about what Mirador Real Estate does, because I find it really interesting.
So I only caught a little bit of that, but I think what you asked is what we do.
Correct. Yes, correct.
And I caught a little bit about policy and regulation. We have a ton of those in New York City. So one thing we do is when landlords come in from other markets and buy assets in New York, there are people on the ground for all of the policy and all of the things that have to do with leasing, fair housing, rental increases, rent stabilization, rent control, free market, all of that stuff. We help them navigate that through leasing as well as screening and making sure that they get the right tenants in there. There are a lot of scams that go on with identity and things of that nature, and we have a lot of tools to combat that. So when people come in from other states, we do kind of specialize in helping them navigate that market and not get stuck with tenants that in New York, you can squat for sometimes 18 months, almost 2 years before the judge even gets to the case. So it's extremely important that the screening is there. A lot of what we work on in New York, we get called in by developers, multifamily, to work on their assets in leasing, marketing, making sure that is all running smoothly. A lot of times investors or if someone's looking to sell the building, they want to make sure that they're getting, they're maximizing their rent rolls, they're cutting down days on market. They want to make sure that every lead that they're paying for is counting with high closing ratio people. Our company has kind of a rare thing. We've got a lot of 10-year plus salespeople that just work in leasing. A lot of times in real estate, your salespeople after a few years will move into sales. Our people go in and they have some of the highest closing ratios in the business. So if they're noticing that they're paying a ton of money for lead gen, but nothing is sticking, we'll send our salespeople in and we can bring that closing ratio down from maybe 1 out of 20 to 1 out of 5, which helps their marketing spends. It helps get stuff leased faster in the right cycles. So we go in and supplement leasing, or we take over leasing in multifamily assets. We do find that in some of the larger management companies, their leasing people are there as a stepping stone to be an APM or a property manager. And I'm a big believer when we do strengths testing that the people in property management should be very strong administratively, where your people in sales are usually testing on other strengths and they're not as strong administratively. It's very hard to find that sort of Venn diagram that crosses over. So our people are very, say, like high on the D or DI on the disc. They're very good at inbound sales. They're very good at outbound. They're much weaker on that SC, which I find that SC profile is excellent for an APM, for, for a manager. We also find in buildings where your property manager is also doing your leasing, sometimes there will be bias based off of shortfalls in the building. So I noticed, we went to a building and I toured with their property manager, who was fantastic. And I noticed his body language freeze up when this family came into tour and they had more than one car. And I noticed that his sort of sparkle faded, because although he's trying to pitch and sell the property, he knows that they have a parking shortage and that this is going to be a problem down the road. So sometimes it's really important that your salespeople and your manager work together but are separate, because your salespeople should be very excited about everybody coming in, where your manager and their practicality or their bias from past situations. I'm not talking about like a fair housing bias. I'm talking about a bias with, they might not like this, or we had a family sort of like this that didn't like X, and they have a hard time explaining that maybe that there is a parking shortage. So
Yeah.
things like that. So sometimes it's important to separate.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So these folks who go in, they work for you. These are Mirador employees, correct?
Yeah, they're actually independent contractors. In New York City,
Okay.
all of our agents are licensed, and licensed agents are independent contractors by nature. Our W-2s, our employees, are in our other teams, like closing department, management, all of that, marketing. And our salespeople are 1099. And I do find that there is a very different leadership style that you have to have in managing 1099 salespeople versus W-2 salespeople. W-2 salespeople, you can tell them they have to go to a meeting. It's the where and when, they have to be places. You have to have a check and balance in a project that you're working on, that it's appealing enough that these 1099s want to do it. You cannot make anybody do anything as a 1099 or as an agent. So you can't assign them to a project. You can't tell them they have to be there for certain hours. You really have to keep that balance with the developer and make sure it is an appealing enough project that you have agents that want to work on it and work hard. And when you do, that 1099 salesperson can take leads at 8 a.m. They can take leads at 10 o'clock at night, where your W-2 salespeople on the project cannot answer leads after they leave, because they are not exempt employees. They are not managing other people. So once that 5 o'clock time spot hits, they cannot answer that lead. If they're not back until Monday and 2 days pass, all of those leads can sort of die on the vine. And I'm finding that the AI solutions or solutions like that are not as good at converting those leads into appointments. If you're kind of writing them back 2 days later, it's, as the real person, the AI can take it so far with qualifying, but they can't really answer deeper questions. We also find when the AI does appointment setting, those appointments show up only 40% of the time, where when a salesperson does appointment setting, we have a show up rate over 90%. So, you can turn on these things, but they're not as good as just having live salespeople 7 days a week that can tour 7 days a week.
Yeah, I think that the companies that are out there today that are really looking at AI that's the answer. I think they're misguided today. Now, maybe it will be at some point, but I don't think it's as smooth and seamless and as effective as they want to believe that it is. And certainly the companies that are selling that technology wants you to believe that it's highly effective and efficient. And, I think there's still a lot of work to be done on that front.
I've seen it actually kill a lot of deals, because it can only go by what you feed it, and it'll say things like, oh yeah, we don't have anything available, and meanwhile the manager just told you someone isn't going to, not everything is uploaded to the software that it pulls from that quickly. And I have seen it kill a lot of prospects accidentally. A lot of times they don't even want to give transparency of what it's saying to your sales team so the sales team can jump in. The better AI tools I've seen, you can watch what it's doing in real time. It's copying to your CRM. It can't operate in a bubble. So when that handoff needs to happen, if you see it going in the wrong direction, your salesperson can jump in. There's a lot of stuff it's great for. Sending applications after a tour. A lot of times salespeople forget to do that. Answering basic questions, doing some light appointment setting, things of that nature. It could definitely open up space for your salespeople to be able to spend more meaningful time with that person. But where I find it falls apart is a lot of buildings, especially in New York, are not uniform. Not every building has the same bathroom, kitchen. You might have a renovation from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and 2010s
Right.
going on in the same
Sure.
building. So it'll be answering questions, but sometimes you haven't seen a unit in 20 years. You have no idea what that unit looks like. If you're applying it to a building, say that belongs to Avalon, who are very into consistency and renovation, it could very much work. You can answer questions properly, or they did a ground up build. They know everything about every unit. In 100-year-old buildings, you don't know everything about every unit. You don't know what renovations went on, even without your knowledge. New York is a trickier jungle. If you're doing a ground up new development, AI can be much more helpful than in something where you actually don't know the answer. You could walk in, it could be a 2-bed, it could be a 1-bed. You're not sure. You don't have floor plans. You don't have, these things. So depending on product, it can be helpful. But what I do find is a lot of it doesn't want to work with the rest of it. So it wants to be this standalone thing.
Right.
And we get pitched like, oh, just have your salespeople log into this other app. They're already logging into Yardi. They're already logging in to all of this other reporting that the individual investors want. Now they have to log into another app. Leads can go there to die because people forget to log in. They're not going to log into another app. Yardi doesn't want that integration. So it's just never going to get adopted. I haven't seen it work well yet for where it would be really helpful is like the closing process, like, hey, you uploaded this document, you uploaded it to the tax return section. It's a picture of your cat, re-upload it.
Yeah.
That would be great if we didn't have to do that. And I know it can do that, but it doesn't do that yet. A lot of the email back and forth is in the closing part of the transaction that people have questions on. And I have seen no AI come out yet for the closing part of the transaction. We pay, I think, 120 hours a week of just pure closing team to jump into Yardi onsite, and other programs to help deals actually move along and have a high closing ratio. You'll notice in some of these pieces of software that the closing ratio in multifamily, they'll apply. No one's checked in on who is this applicant? Are they moving forward? So you'll see these drop rates on applications of like 40%. Our drop rates with the humans being in there we close about 96% of people who apply. Where the drop rates of just having an online application system with no humans helping people along, you'll see these drop rates of 40%, and that's not an effective use of your marketing dollars.
So the operators are out there that are considering eliminating human beings for machines. You're saying not so fast. Be careful because it's not as effective and efficient as you want to believe that it can be.
The thing about human beings in the touring process that I think is important is that it's twofold. One, it's a very large purchase, and you'll notice that people are going back to, with large purchases, they like to have their rep. You're buying Hermes, you're buying Chanel. Your rent is more expensive than both of those things. They like a person. They like a person to answer, questions. An example of this was in the pandemic in New York City. We all kind of on-site teams all went remote. They tried to do a lot with video. We didn't allow any video to go online because video of a 280 square foot apartment is never complimentary, especially if you're the only one in there taking that video. Advertising is to get leads. People forget that. You're not going to be selling an apartment off the ad. So to put crappy camera phone video in an ad means it lives on the internet forever, not just during the pandemic. You can never get it down.
Yeah.
And you'll probably just end up getting less leads. So what we did was we found that more deals were closing, like when we were doing FaceTime tours on, I believe it was the iPhone 14 and later. whatever it was at the time, where the iPhones before, we were noticing a lower closing ratio on those FaceTime tours. So we upgraded everyone's phones to that level of iPhone, and we
Interesting.
required live FaceTime tours, even though we couldn't meet in person. So if they wanted to tour multiple properties, we would book them like for every 15 minutes, they get the agent that was at this building, live FaceTime, the agent that was at this building, live FaceTime. And the questions that would come up would never be on a promotional video. The questions were, can you go outside and show me what's going on outside right now? Can
Right.
you show
Right.
me where the garbage chute is? Where's the elevator? Where's the electricals? Can you show me what the hallways look like? Who's in the lobby? All of these things that they'd want to see again. We'd never put that stuff in a promotional video. So we have a
Right.
policy where if someone can't be there, we first ask them, once the things were lifted, we ask them if they can't be there, we'll live FaceTime tour. But also, do you have a friend in the city? Do you have a coworker that you trust that could come on this tour? And because they know you, because taking an apartment in New York sight unseen, especially as neighborhoods shift and change, is really tricky. So we would have
Sure.
them sort of ask a friend to tag along. They really like that. So they would be on live video. Their friend would be there being the devil's advocate, or be like, she's going to
Right.
really hate this. I know this looks good in pictures, but she's not going to like this. And that helped with people not backing out when they showed up, because the friend was there to verify, along with the live video tour. So we found, even in a situation where tech would have been really handy, people who were uploading Matterport video, people, and their sales teams were trying to do this thing remote, couldn't close anything. The places where we had live video tours only had, I think, 6 to 8 points in occupancy rate higher than the buildings who put like video online.
This is really interesting. I'm fascinated by this. You mentioned something. I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. You talked about when you would have for instance, a meeting, your W-2s would say when and where. So I would imagine your 1099s, their question is probably why? Why do we have to attend this meeting? So what's it like
I always
to
say
lead?
you have to run 1099s by either love or fear. So a
Okay,
1099
that's what I was going to ask.
is
What's it
kind
like
of
to
just like,
lead them?
yeah, you've got to lead them love, fear. So they show up to places because they are underperforming and they're afraid that they'll be taken off of a project, or they'll show up to places because you have to make that project so enticing that they want to show up and go to that meeting. So you either have to take things away or add things to their life that will make them show up. I do find that 1099 leadership is a love or fear based leadership, because you have to know and respect. You cannot say we have a mandatory meeting. There's no such thing as a mandatory meeting with a 1099, whether it be a real estate agent or whether it be with any 1099. It's not allowed. So it is different. But when they do show up, they show up twice as long, twice as hard. It's interesting.
But it's not so much about the 1099 status as it is their own. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not as much. Although I understand that the status dictates what you can and cannot do, but for them internally, it's not so much about their status, 1099 versus W-2, as it is what motivates them personally. Is that accurate?
Yeah, because these people aren't looking for a W-2 role. Our W-2s want that respect of, when I leave at 5 o'clock, you're not going to call me. Where the 1099s, if you're not picking up their calls at 8:30 p.m. or you're not texting them back at 10 p.m., they're upset. They're like, are you angry with me? Are you mad at me? It's a different core value set. It's a different, again, we do a lot of personality testing, and that high D personality wants you to be very, very responsive no matter the time, day or night, where the S and C personality want some boundaries. They deserve some boundaries,
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that people make in leadership is a lot of leaders believe it's their job to motivate the team. And I've been saying for a long time that I think that's a myth. I don't know if you know who Mel Robbins is, but she's a podcaster. She's in New York, has written a couple of New York Times bestseller books, and very, very well known. And she says motivation is a bunch of garbage, meaning the idea that I can motivate our team. motivation, I've been saying for years, motivation is very personal. Everybody has their motivation for why they work out, for why they, save money, for why they don't drink, for why they, work so hard. But I also say that motivation is never a constant. If you go to the gym, I'm guessing that you go work out on days when you just don't want to, right? And I think that's most people's experience, is that motivation comes and goes, but it's personal to me. And I think that the job for leaders is to understand how to inspire these people. And you said
Yeah.
love or fear. And by fear, I understand what you're saying. You're not saying that you yell and scream and curse. I was in the military. They used fear in a very different way, right? It's the fear of God, if you will, like your parents did when you're a little child, the fear of the punishment. And so you're saying fear
Yeah,
as
it could
in
be
like,
fear of
I'm
missing
going
out.
to, yeah, right. I'm a fear, exactly. A fear of missing
It
out.
could just be
And so
FOMO.
that's a personal
Yeah.
fear. It's not that you're trying to scare them. It's that personal fear. That's that personal motivation. And so, that
No,
has to
you
be,
try to scare them too much, you get sued.
yeah, yeah,
My
especially in New York.
from growing up as a leader, I mean, I started my own company. My first brokerage was when I was 25. And, I was definitely immature. And sometimes you act like what you think a leader acts like. Luckily, I was lucky enough to work with one of Tony Robbins' VPs as my personal coach. And she, I worked with her for about 8 years, and she got a lot of that out of me. And I realized when I am angry, I give off indifference. And I let my team know that. And indifference is actually the most dangerous thing that comes out of me.
I would imagine it. Yeah, indifference can be really, really damaging, right? What I've always said, that the minute somebody stops caring, it's over. If I don't care about
Yeah.
the relationship is in big trouble.
Yeah.
If I don't care about the outcome, probably not going to get a very good outcome, right? So yeah, indifference can be deadly.
Yeah. And one of the coolest things in multifamily that we get to do, which a lot of people, New York has extreme hiring and protections on
Oh
W-2
yeah,
salespeople, where sometimes
yeah.
they're just not right for the project. In our business, we will kick off with maybe 5 agents on a project that show interest. And I'm always shocked at like the 2 that remain, because we always say, if you're not feeling this project, you don't have to be on it. We can swap you off, we'll put you on something else. And we can change salespeople so rapidly until we find the ones that click every week. That developers are really impressed by that, because a lot of times they'll hire a salesperson. It takes them a whole year to cycle them out. We can cycle them out weekly, and we do. And in our culture, no one takes offense to that, because we say, you've shown 20 clients, you've closed 1 deal. This guy's shown 5 and he closes 1 deal. You don't like this. And they're like, you know what? I don't like it. I'm going to go work on this instead. I'm going to swap with him and take over that other project. And having that openness and ability, a lot of developers really like that, because they've all been stuck with a salesperson that they know hates their product, hates them something, and it takes months to get them out of a project. And even after that, sometimes they'll still get hit with a lawsuit, and it's really
Right.
disappointing, because in sales, I feel like your salespeople should really be into your product, and they should have the ability to say, I'm not into this product, put me on something else, and we can
Yeah.
cycle that very quickly the way that we're structured.
Yeah, I've often said that the best salespeople that have worked for me in the past, I used to call them assassins. They would see the car pull into the parking lot and they've got them in their sights. They're ready to pick them off. I mean, they get immediately excited and energized. Can't wait for that person to walk through the door, because they know they're about to solve their problems. And
Yeah.
so listen, I think that's a great point. Because of New York employment laws, you can cycle them out very quickly. But I love what you said about, how, that's part of our culture. So what you're saying is, that we make sure that what's growing in our culture is honesty and transparency, that we can't afford to manage around your feelings. We have to manage around results. And that means that we're honest and we're transparent with you.
Well, and if all of our salespeople are very experienced, I mean, the typical age of the salesperson is about 8 years in the industry that work for us. we know that they've had good results. No one is doubting their ability. So once we get that out of the way, like, hey, you were an absolute rock star on this project. You're not connecting to this one. It's not personal. It's the project. So sometimes I'll show up at things and, I'll take on the business because I know someone on my team will love it, but I don't love it. I don't see the value in living there. But then there's stuff I love that's extremely high end that other people are like, why would anybody spend that much money for this? I'm like, there is a client base for this. I love this. This is really unique. And you just want to see, a lot of times when we do the initial tour of a project, we invite every agent that wants to come. And I watch their body language. I watch them fight with each other when one's like, I don't love this shower insulation. They're like, are you kidding? Glass is so much better than that shower curtain sticking to you, even though, like, whatever it is. I'll see them arguing with each other about the value of the project. And I'll be like, that's our salesperson. And I thought this might have been it, but they're not. And, you can see certain people like defending it and getting excited about it, and certain people that are saying, I think this is a piece of crap development and it's too far from the center of the city. And other people like, why would you want to be in the center of the city? And that's how you can find your people that can sell. And that body language and that kind of interaction, you really want to encourage, because that's how you find your best salespeople. A lot of times when you're interviewing salespeople for multifamily, you're interviewing them in a bubble. They don't even get to walk the property. It's so weird. They're like, this was assigned to me from another project. They're coming from another building. They've never even been to the building.
Right. Now go sell it.
Yeah, like, this is a person that transferred from Greystar, California, because Greystar is a great policy where if you are working at Greystar in one state, you can easily apply in another state,
Sure.
So they're like, we got a new salesperson. She's from Kentucky. And you're like, does she know how to sell $15,000 a month apartments, And often they don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're called in to just take over a segment. So we'll be called in if they have like too many apartments over $10,000. Their sales team is fine with the stuff, studios, one beds, but those top, too many penthouses, too many 3 bedrooms, selling items like over 10,000, over 15,000 is a different salesperson that can sell a value play. So sometimes we're called in just to solve the problem of, we have too many of the expensive apartments. We need your sales team just to work on that. We don't need them for the one beds and the studios. And we get called into temp projects like that a lot too.
Right. So, I want to encourage everyone who watches this podcast to research something called subjective comparison reasoning, because that's what you just talked about. When you talked about how someone can come in to an apartment and they can say, wow, I love this. And somebody's like, oh, I don't love that at all. That's subjective comparison reasoning. And people who are great at sales have mastered the skills of understanding what subjective comparison reasoning is, which is nothing more than everyone's individual value system. Why does somebody drive a Ford when somebody else drives a Bentley? And even though the person who drives a Ford could afford a Bentley, they choose a Ford. Why? Because they don't see the value in tying up all their money in a Bentley. What's the purpose of a car? To get me from point A to point B? It does, it's fine. Where the Bentley owner says, oh, I would never be caught dead going from point A to point B in that. For me, it's about, social appeal. I want to look successful. That's subjective comparison reasoning.
Well, and what's funny
really honing in on that.
What's interesting about that is it's also social appeal. I have a lot of clients who are multi-millionaires, even billionaires, that want to not get kicked out of their friend group. So the people they grew up with, where they live, so they wouldn't drive the Bentley, not because they don't appreciate the Bentley. They don't drive the Bentley because the town that they're in, they don't want to stand out. They don't want to get their ass kicked.
Yeah.
They don't want their friends to make fun of them. They want to make sure that they're not outgrowing the social group that they're in.
Absolutely.
Either. There's a lot of people that make decisions that way. Like, I want to live in this town, so all my friends live here,
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, when I talk about, our individual value systems. So you said that you got into leadership at 25. Did I get that right?
I'm hearing like snippets. I heard something about 25.
Yeah, sorry.
I started my own brokerage at 25. I got into real estate right after undergrad. So
I'm going to ask a tough question. How difficult was it at that age, being a woman, to go into that world, as a leader? How were you received?
Not difficult at all. I think what's exciting about being 25 and doing anything is you don't even know what you don't know. So I think you just assume, this is going to go great. And part of it did,
Yeah.
and it led me to better things. And part of it was a total disaster. So, but I think just assuming everything's going to go well for you is half the battle.
I find, having worked as an executive in the multifamily world, and now, I'm a full-time speaker and trainer. So I get to travel all over the country and speak for management companies, sometimes apartment associations. And I find that the industry is filled with women at the site level, the regional level, the VP level, but very rarely at the C-suite, at the CEOs, the COOs. It's changing, but it's
And the
still at
ownership
the
level,
top.
very
Yeah,
rare.
the ownership level. Yep, right. Very rarely. I see that changing, but it's changing very slowly. Is there a reason behind that, in your opinion?
I've read about it. I think that women often are like the workhorse, and they don't necessarily like strive to be. I think a lot of women in multifamily know that they are the leader, and they don't necessarily need the titles as much. So maybe they don't push for that, because I do find in multifamily it's often run by females, where ownership often is not, but ownership that's smart picks those like female workhorses to run their stuff. Getting into development is extremely risky. People assume landlords are just rich, always making profit. You have to put a lot on the line to develop a project. You have to have a lot of capital, a lot of
Yeah,
partners. It's a big risk.
right.
A lot of times, banks and partners might not look at you and your track record and say, although you know how to run this building, do you know how to build this building? I think it's something women will get into. We're seeing a lot more, generational wealth go that way in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing a lot of sort of patriarchs of real estate families leaving a lot to their adult daughters. So I think we are already seeing it shift. There was an article in the Real Deal about this recently, that they're kind of not skipping over the sons, but focusing on who they want to focus on. And a lot of times we are seeing that happen with adult daughters. Yeah. As far as real estate legacy and real estate family. So I think we will start to see more of it.
Yeah, to me, it's never mattered. I just like working with competent people, and I couldn't care less whether it's a man or a woman. But I know not everybody feels that way and thinks that way. And I'm sure that, especially in New York, you probably have run across more than one occasion of little lady, sweetheart, honey, kind of, stupid stuff like that.
Less than you'd think.
I'm good. I'm glad to hear that.
I'm pretty tall. I think men can identify women that they can prey on. And I don't think I come across as that. So I've actually been extremely fortunate. I kind of seem like the woman that if you say something like that to, you will have a consequence. I don't know why, but it's just my vibe. Yeah. I've gotten it once or twice outside of New York, because again, I did start this very young, and I have gotten that if you're a good girl, I'll give you the video. And frankly, I've lost my shit on that person almost immediately, in front of my team and everything. And a lot of times there's a lot of pain behind those people. I found when people like to demean or make you feel a certain way, when you actually put up a strong boundary and ask them, what would make you say that? What would make you think that that's okay? Not in a mean way, but almost like a who hurt you kind of way. I found a theme that runs through is they actually had some like devastating loss of a daughter or a devastating loss of a female that they really cared for. And for some reason it comes out that way. I don't know, and in multiple times where I've had to say, even politely, like, you're lucky it's me that you said that to, because a resident with a good lawyer in this climate, it might not work,
Right.
Why?
That's a good point.
What's going on? What's your thing with women? And then it'll start out like, no, I love women. My daughter actually passed away, or my daughter was murdered, and I just can't function, and it kind of goes to that. It's like, where right now in this what I found when people have done that, you have to almost shock it out. so they don't do it again to a resident, or they don't do it again to a vendor that could get them in real trouble. A lot of times it's building staff, it's supers, building managers that are not working in a corporate environment, and are kind of unchecked. That's usually where I find it. But it's also how you carry yourself, how you dress, and I do see women that kind of lean in to being overly sexualized, overly thinking it's going to get them somewhere, especially in real estate. I always warn against that. That's not a move. It never ends. That's not how you're going to be building long-term relationships. So go in there pretty neutral. There are women who lean into it. I've never been one of those women. I don't like that.
Yeah. So as we wind down on our time, the multifamily world is getting beat up pretty bad, right? Interest rates are terrible. Tax rates are just awful. Insurance rates have gone through the roof. What are you seeing? What's your prediction? How's the next year? How's 2025 going to look? 2026. I'm not asking you to give me a 5-year projection, but this year into next year, what are your predictions? You're seeing a lot, and you're in the largest real estate market in America. So give us a prediction, Karla Saladino.
I am seeing sales become obtainable again for people, because when the interest rates rise, the sales prices need to go down. And for a while, they just were not going anywhere. Now I am seeing things sit on the market a little bit longer, be more open to offers. So I do encourage people to look at sales again instead of renting, for sure. But make sure that you're also shopping your insurance rates before you close, because insurance used to be an afterthought of course, I'll be able to afford the insurance on this. And some people are waking up to the fact that their insurance payment is just as high as their mortgage payment, and it's not obtainable. So that's one. I think the other thing also with rental stock is, if we want rental prices to go down, we have to be allowed to build more rental stock. And in New York, it's very difficult. So rental prices keep going up, but the more rental stock you build, and that you allow developers to build, whether it be through tax abatements or whatnot, don't consistently villainize landlords. They are who build the housing, and you can't make it so anti-landlord, which New York has been doing. Sure. And other states don't, that they pull out of New York and they go develop elsewhere. Developing housing is not easy. You need people who have done it before. And if you piss off those multi-generational development families that everyone wants to villainize, you get really, really crappy buildings. You get buildings that fall down. You get buildings that cannot be seen through to completion. And you get these skylines that are half done that you see places because of amateur developers. What you really want is to attract those developers with a track record of building solid buildings that can see the project through to completion, not have your skyline being dotted with half-done projects, But instead, in New York, I feel like they're villainized and they're chased out. So they're going to Texas, they're going to Florida, they're going to places where it's easier to develop. You don't want amateur developers building high rises. It's dangerous, and they'll run out of money. It won't work, and New York's not the place for that. I think that it needs to be more welcoming to developers. There needs to be more appreciation for what a developer does, what they put out on the line. They'll start a development project. It's not done for 5 years. You can't predict what the market is in 5 years. They could really be caught holding the bag. So you need somebody with some financial backing in order to build up that skyline.
Yeah. Listen, I couldn't agree more. And that our local politics, I don't care if you're in New York or in Texas, our local politics are just making it almost impossible with all the impact fees and the wait times. And it's gotten, and listen, somebody's going to have to pay for that. And guess who pays for it? The renter, because these developers have to recover those costs. It's a real problem for sure. Listen, for anyone who wants to learn more about you, how can they find you?
They can, I'm on Instagram. My LinkedIn has a lot of video content as well. And they can always go to our website for miradorrealestate.com and just sort of start there.
Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. I know our audience will enjoy it. Hopefully it's not too cut up because of the bad connection on my end, but Karla, thank you for joining me. I've enjoyed having you on as a guest.
Well, we can always edit it
I'd love to have
together.
you
And
back.
if you need help with editing, I have an editor, so he can always come in here and try to.
Yeah, we actually, our group has a professional editor who does all the editing for us. So hopefully
Good.
he'll be able
That
to clean
saves so
this
much
up.
time.
Yeah, I don't touch it. Trust me, I'm not involved in the editing on any level. Thank you again for joining us, and for our audience, thank you for. Go ahead.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention to you, and you can leave this in or leave this out, is I noticed that you're in Houston and you do a lot of public speaking. I work on a building in Houston. I think it's the best building in downtown Houston. It's called Market Square Tower, and it went viral because it has that pool that comes off the roof, then see through to the bottom. So you may have seen those videos because it was streamed millions of times across the internet, but it's right across from Market Square in downtown Houston. And we have one of the most beautiful ballrooms that you can do presentations in and you can do seminars in and everything like that. So if you ever need use of our ballroom, hit me up and I'll hook you up with our staff down there. But I think Market Square Tower is one of the most gorgeous rental projects I've ever been in. And it happens to be in Houston.
I know the project, so thank you for that. We appreciate it. Well, and I'm sure I will hit you up on that. I never say no to an invitation that's too good to pass. Thank you again for joining us, and for our audience, thank you for joining another episode of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a review, and share it with your network. And remember, this podcast is proudly brought to you by Multifamily Media Network, your trusted source for stories, trends, and insights in multifamily living. I appreciate you checking out my episode. I'm Bill Nye, and this was Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye.